Hello everyone, this is Crimson. I just wanted to make this short little addition to the start of the video. So, during recording of the part 1 of the Dead Space art book, the book ended up being slightly out of frame at the bottom on some pages. That was completely my fault and I genuinely apologize. I have done my best to try and alleviate that, and I've gone back and I've re-recorded some of these sections. But yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know that I am aware of it and I am genuinely sorry, and I will make a conscious effort going forward, not just with this book, but with all of my future art book videos, to ensure that the book stays in frame at all times. Thank you very much and enjoy the video. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Crimson, and in this video we are going to be starting our look through of the Art of Dead Space art book. This is an art book that I have been excited about covering on the channel for quite a while, based on one, being a big Dead Space fan, and I have not actually gone through this entire art book yet. I've only skimmed it because I wanted to kind of keep it to go through it live with you guys. So, for those of you who are not familiar with Dead Space is a third-person shooter, psychological horror game, which, in my opinion, and this is just my personal preference, of course, Dead Space is my favorite horror game of all time. Either Dead Space 1 or Dead Space 2, I don't know. I actually started with Dead Space 2 and then went back and played Dead Space 1, so I think I favor Dead Space 2 a little bit more, just because that was my entry point into the series. So, yeah, let's just get started. So we see on the sleeve cover here, we have this picture of Isaac in his engineer suit. And let's just read what's on the back of the book. So it says, "The Art of Dead Space is the ultimate gallery of the Dead Space universe, with over 300 iconic concept art images and sketches, many never seen before, and detailed commentary from the acclaimed artists throughout. From the necromorph-infested depths of the USG Ishimura to the frozen tundra of Tau Volantis, Dead Space's dramatic scope is sure to fantasize and terrify in equal parts." That is true. Now, I believe, and based on just my understanding of when I bought the book and based on the description on the back of the book, that this book covers all 3 Dead Space games, so 1, 2, and 3. Really looking forward to seeing about Dead Space 1. Absolutely super excited to go through Dead Space 2. And then there is Dead Space 3, which, you know, it exists, unfortunately, but we are going to cover it nonetheless. So yeah, let us get started. One thing I should mention, I just want to, actually, you know what? I'll save that to when we get to a bit of him. So we start off with a Rorschach test here. Again, this is, I'm assuming this is meant to look like Isaac Clarke's helmet. Maybe you guys see something different, let me know. And actually, I forgot to say that at the time of me recording this video, the Dead Space 1 remaster has been out for about 10 or 11 months at this point, and the remaster is absolutely amazing. However, the original game actually didn't really need a remaster. there's some games where they get too old and too clunky, and it's like, okay, it's time to, you know, polish things up a bit. The original Dead Space is 110% still playable and still as enjoyable and terrifying, despite it having slightly worse graphics. So if you are interested by this book in playing Dead Space, both the original and the remaster version are available on Steam, and I really appreciate the fact that they left the original game up for sale when the remaster came out, because a lot of the times when remasters for games come out, they remove the original from the store page, so anyone who wants to play the game has to play the remaster. For example, like Resident Evil 3 remaster or remake. So let's get started. So here we have, actually, you know what? Just before we move too much further, I'm just gonna remove the sleeve so that it is out of our way. It just says Dead Space in an embossed logo on the cover. You guys might not be able to make it out. So here we have our protagonist throughout the entire series, Isaac Clarke. Isaac Clarke is a engineer for space ships and spacecrafts, which is really cool because at the time, you know, most horror game protagonists then were badass, super elite soldiers, going in, you know, think like Resident Evil, where you're playing as like Chris Redfield or Leon Kennedy, you know, all extremely skilled in combat, and all. But Dead Space, on the other hand, kind of mixes things up a little bit. Isaac is an engineer, and in Dead Space 1, he's essentially just the repairman, and yet he is able to fight his way through the game. We will get more in detail about that as we continue, because I don't want to spoil too much right now. Sorry, let me move the camera a little bit. There we go. Here we go. So this is a screenshot from, I believe this was a promotional art piece for Dead Space 2. We have Isaac, who is currently in space, in zero gravity, firing his plasma cutter at the necromorphs here. And I'm not going to get ahead of myself despite wanting to, but I will discuss what necromorphs are later. Now, his weapon here is called the plasma cutter, and it's the most iconic weapon in Dead Space. In fact, in the original Dead Space, there is an achievement for beating the game only using the plasma cutter, and I got this on my very first playthrough of the original Dead Space. I didn't even know it was an achievement. I just, one, really like the plasma cutter. I mean, it's good. It's one of those weapons that's good in every situation, and you can upgrade it so it has crazy damage. And I believe the final upgrade is something mad, like, you know, shots that land on targets cause the enemy to burst into flames. So yeah, and also, since I mentioned the remaster, this art book came out before the release of the remaster. So all of the Dead Space 1 content in this book is going to be from the original Dead Space 1 rather than the remaster. Okay, so here is our table of contents. This is just a forward thing about Visceral Studios. I'm not going to read too much into this because this is just about the studio. Visceral Studios is the studio that made Dead Space 1, 2, and 3. They eventually got bought by EA, and then when Dead Space 3 flopped, EA did its usual and sent Visceral Games to the Shadow Realm. So yeah, Visceral Games is no longer with us, and Dead Space 4 was cancelled. But if it was going to be anything like Dead Space 3, I'm actually glad it was cancelled. Okay, our introduction. Isaac Clarke, here we go. This is again a picture from Dead Space 2. So this is the suit that Isaac has in Dead Space 2. This is like the default suit. There are different variants you can get that offer certain rewards. But yeah, and this is his plasma cutter. So there is a little bit about Isaac Clarke here, so let us read it. So I'm just moving this a bit closer so I can see. So, an ordinary hero. Video game leads are usually cut from the same cloth, be they super soldiers, bravado cops, or daring renegades. There's no shortage of extraordinary hero. Isaac Clarke is a little different though. An everyman placed in a horrifying situation. He is in many ways the perfect cipher for players lost in the bloody chaos of the Dead Space games. Cannot agree with this paragraph enough. When you're starting up your project, you're thinking, what can your player do? How does the environment react to him and things like that, explains creative director Ben Wanat. Apologies if I mispronounced your name. You're not really thinking about his personality at that point. Very quickly we decided we didn't want someone who is a superhero. As an engineer, Isaac Clarke could stake a claim to being one of video games' most prominent working class heroes. Very true. If it wasn't for a certain plumber, I wonder who that could be, his profession is more than just a way of grounding the character though. It's also a way of making him fit within the game experience. The engineer thing really fitted, says Wanat. We were thinking of puzzles, so it was great to have a guy who works on machines. Of course, it also gives you the excuse of having this guy who goes to this rundown spaceship where he's going to fix everything. So yeah, that's just a little bit about Isaac Clarke. Like I had previously mentioned, he's not a hero, he's not a soldier, he's not a cop, he's just a repairman essentially, which is really cool. Getting to play as they said here, an everyman. One thing I forgot to mention in the beginning is in Dead Space 1, the original, Isaac Clarke is a silent protagonist. And then in the Dead Space 1 remake, Isaac Clarke talks. This is very divisive among the community as to which is better. I just think having a silent protagonist is cool. However, it is kind of funny that throughout the game, Isaac is being told to do this, go here, repair this, kill this, realign this, and the whole time he doesn't say anything, he just goes and does it, which is hilarious. He kind of does the same thing in the remake, but he does kind of talk back a little bit, which is understandable. Someone trapped on a hellhole like the Ishimura wouldn't exactly be keen on going into enemy territory to fix a bloody air conditioner or whatever Isaac does. Okay, so these are concept arts for Isaac. So we see I believe these are the two concept arts in and of themselves. Here and here, he appears to have a weapon wielded onto his arm, which is an interesting choice. He also does not have a helmet and just has welder's goggles, which is very cool. And speaking of Isaac's design, one thing I need to mention is this bar that you see on the back of Isaac. What is this? Dead Space does something incredible. where all of your stuff that would normally be in your HUD in normal games, such as your ammo, your health, in Dead Space's case, your stasis. So this is, it is all on Isaac's back. So there are no menus for healing. There's no menus for anything. Every status of Isaac can be viewed just by looking at him. So this is him at full health. As Isaac takes damage, this will slowly deplete and turn from blue to yellow, and then yellow to red. And then this is the stasis or kinesis meter, which works very similar. The more you use it, the more this goes down, and you have to refill it at certain stations. We will get into what stasis is a little later. So here is some more concept art. So let's see. Sorry, let me move the camera a little bit. So this says, Isaac wasn't born whole. He went through some surprising iterations early on in the creation of the first Dead Space. We had a bunch of early concepts where he had energy weapons and blades. I'm assuming that's what these are meant to be here. And this looks like a blade version of Isaac here. Where was I? Says when at. But it just wasn't working, so we scaled it back and thought, who is Isaac, the man, and how does he fit into this? Early concepts show an Isaac that is more archetypal video game lead, which is true. These do look more like your standard horror game protagonists, with sketches showing a rugged and more traditionally heroic protagonist. Over time, the Isaac that went out to define Dead Space emerged. Now, this is not to say that Isaac is not heroic. He is extremely heroic and extremely brave. However, he does not appear to be heroic or brave just by looking at him. He looks just like a normal repairman. He doesn't look like a badass. You know, like this guy here looks like a badass. So do these guys. This is an exoskin 0G combat armor, so this is obviously for zero gravity. Here is a bit of concept art. So we have lightly armored professor suit, for added mobility, energy spikes, offensive and defensive melee energy weapons, small ranged sidearm for backup, and magnetic boots. Dead Space features a lot of areas that have 0G, so that's why in designs there are stuff like the 0G combat armor and magnetic boots. It's so Isaac can kind of walk around these 0G areas by walking on like the walls and the ceilings and stuff without floating off and away. One thing about the original game and the remaster that is a absolute improvement regardless of what anyone says. In the original, the 0G areas are very frustrating because you have to essentially dive from one spot to the other. And I don't know if it's just me, but I found this to be very buggy on PC. In the remaster, you have just free floating around 0G areas, which I believe is the same in Dead Space 2. But that is one of those improvements that needed to be made. And I'm so glad they did, because it turned 0G areas, for me anyway, from an area that, you know, I would sigh and roll my eyes every time I had to go into one, to actually being excited about going in and getting to float around and stuff. And most of the 0G areas are for puzzles, but there's also enemies that are on the walls and that will leap at you and stuff. So it's very, very cool. Here is some more concept art of Isaac. However, these ones are a lot closer to the final design of Isaac with his suit. It looks very industrial, lots of metal plating. You can see the health bar. As you upgrade the suit in Dead Space, it gets more armor plating. So as you can see here, this is just a kind of quick example. You know, you start off the game with a suit like this that's mainly just a basic engineering suit. And then as you progress and unlock more suit upgrades, you slowly start to build up. And by the end, you end up looking something like this, like absolutely covered in armor, but still in mechanics uniform, which is really, really cool. There are alternate outfits and armor sets that you can get for Isaac. But for me personally, when I play Dead Space, I always just keep them on the original because I think the original armor is so, so cool. So let's read what it says here. It says, a constant visual motif in the Dead Space universe is ribbing. Ribbing meaning that's these kind of armor bits here that increase as you level up your suit. It is, sorry, where was I? It is represented in the architecture of the Ishimura, the layout of the sprawl, and the seared ice plains of Tau Volantis. It is also an internal part of Isaac's suit. The design was very random at the beginning, with pencil sketches of a varied design. Illuminates artist Shi Wei Lao. I apologize if I butchered your name. But as our fiction started to shape up, with Isaac being a space engineer stranded in a horrific ship, struggling to survive, some of the sketches I drew started to click with the idea. I linked the unique ribbing motif with a lot of repeated blocky plates on top of the bodysuit. So those plates are these bits here, the white parts. The suit's ribbing reinforces that motif, ties in visually with the design of the Ishimura, and has other purposes too. Technologically, we wanted to invest in the lighting. So a serrated texture like that gives a lot of the light to play around on, says the director Ian Milham. Again, apologies, I'm terrible at names. Who has helped define the look of Dead Space from its genesis. The player's going to move through the lighting, and it gave the shadows a lot to do. So yeah, Dead Space is a very dark game, not like in terms of its story or anything. It is a very dark story, but dark in the literal sense that the environments are very, very dark, and necromorphs like to hide in the shadows. But yeah, that's just a bit of cool insight into Isaac's design. I am trying not to get ahead of myself, so if I'm reading things or I'm talking about things and such as, you know, the Ishimura, and you might be wondering, you know, what's the Ishimura? We will be covering that later on in the book. I did do a quick skim through. But I don't want to get ahead of myself, and I'd rather wait until we get to that section to cover it in great detail. So here is some more concept art of Isaac's suit. We have three different variations, sorry. So we have this one with a single slot visor, this one which has a kind of half dome faceplate. This reminds me a lot of the EVA helmet from Halo. And then this one has two eye slots here, circular ones, which is really cool. And here it says, Isaac's suit empowers the player, but it is also important that it's still maintenance on air and valuable resources. We wanted to communicate that he is not a soldier, says Milhelm. He needs to look tough and strong because he's a hero, but he's not a soldier. As soon as you put big plates on the front, it looks like he's designed to be shot at, which is very, very funny. So, here we have Isaac hacking his way through some necromorphs. I'm not sure what this weapon here actually is. It looks like the Ripper gun, maybe? Just based on the circular design here. I could be wrong about that. If I am, I apologize, but we have a necromorph here who Isaac is in the middle of killing, and then we have another necromorph behind him, trying to sneak up on him. Here is a great piece. So I'm just going to quickly read what it says, and then we'll talk about the art. In the first Dead Space, Isaac's suit reflected the cold steel of the Ishimura, while in the second, the different facets of the sprawl, actually never mind, we'll get to that later, meant a variety of different looks. For Dead Space 3, Isaac's signature look is defined by the icy expanses of Tau Volantis with the rugged and protective snowsuit. So yeah, that is one good thing. It's like kind of a diamond in a pile of shit in Dead Space 3, that the snowsuit armor and everything in Tau Volantis looks amazing. So here we have Isaac with his plasma cutter fighting a necromorph. This is actually one of the bosses that we encounter throughout the game. We fight him many times. He's one of those bosses that we fight him, and then when his health gets low, he runs off, and then we fight him like 3 more times before we kill him. Isaac looks like he's rappelling up a side of a cliff based on the footwear that he has and the rope here. And we also have a little necromorph here. I don't know if you can see this, but it is basically a head with 4 little legs. So kind of like a more horrific version of a head crab from Half-Life. Okay, here is some really good stuff, concept art-wise, of Isaac. This is Isaac's design in Dead Space 3. And I just want to say, this stuff right here, like this kind of concept art, is the reason I love art books. I adore seeing concept art of characters, weapons, areas, and all that. So we are going to read first, and then we will discuss the artwork. So, Dead Space 3 shifts to a colder, harsher locale. In Dead Space 3, we wanted to try something different, mainly driven by the fiction and environments that Isaac would be placed in, which involves a deserted base and a shipwrecks from a couple hundred years ago, as well as the ice planet itself. We needed suits that could look very aged and have a thick, bulky silhouette that would echo the cold weather. There's also less use of metal plating, which is true. So we used a lot more cloth on this suit. So yeah. So here is some of that concept art. So here we have some kind of sketches of it, variations of the different types of helmets and how they might be assembled, which is really cool. Here is a little bit of a sleeker armor design. This looks more akin to something out of Dead Space 2. But here is an example of what I am talking about earlier with the health system. So the guy on the right here has full health, and the guy on the left here has very, very low health. So it's a way of keeping it all in-game, tied to Isaac. You can see everything that you need to, your ammo, your stasis, your health. you view your ammo when you aim down your sights at an enemy. There is an ammo reader that pops up that is part of the heads-up display in Isaac's helmet. So it's a great way of making the game more streamlined, and also keeping stuff like menus more in universe, so it doesn't take you out of the experience. Here is a picture of the snowsuit design in Dead Space 3. So again, we have a very similar looking helmet, and it appears to be that Isaac, or whoever this is meant to be, is still wearing their armor underneath. However, they then have snow gear on top of it, and I just think it looks really cool. And I also like the addition of the shoes for climbing ice. Just a very cool detail. Again, another picture. This is this character, but from behind. And here is a totally different character, concept art. Much more tubes, but doesn't look as fitted for snowy environments as this guy does. Also, just quickly before we move on, I just want to say I know that my reading skills so far in this book have been pretty subpar compared to my previous videos. That's just because I am very tired. At the time of me recording this, I have been awake for just under half an hour, so I'm still kind of half asleep. But once I wake up a bit more, it should be fine, and I'll be back to my normal reading skills. So yeah, let's move on. So here we have some more designs. Let's just read what it says here. Dead Space 2 introduced a variety of suits for Isaac, some of which reinforce the series' original aesthetic, while others hinted at other influences on the original design. We wanted the design to have a vintage look, which is echoed in the look of those diver suit designs, says Lau. The nautical theme is not isolated to the suits. It's something that recurs in the necromorphs later on in the series, in some of the new alien species. And that is true. Isaac's suit is very much inspired by some of the old diving suits, like not modern diving suits, but if you look back at some of the very early type of diving suits, they play a big inspiration. So let's have a look-see at this art. So these are all designs on the health bar on Isaac's back, and where they would be placed, what they would look like, how big they are, which is really cool. I think they absolutely nailed the design. These ones are cool, but the one we got in the final product is excellent. And here we have the faceplate that transforms into Isaac's helmet, which is really cool. The whole way Isaac's suit kind of goes together, and the way that this neck guard kind of forms into his helmet is so cool to see in all of the Dead Space games. Here we have some more in-depth character art. So here is just a normal standard human compared to someone in Isaac's armor. Here is a picture of Isaac's helmet. We have the sketch version, and then here's the full color version. Here we have two of the same armor sets. This one is half colored in, half sketch, while this one is fully colored in. This suit here looks very sleek and looks very slim compared to Isaac's standard armor. And here is another rendition of Isaac's armor set. This one appears to be more padded compared to his normal suit, and I actually really like the little accents of red that are on this as well. Shopping for suits. Suit customization becomes an ever bigger part of the Dead Space games throughout the series. The suiting mechanisms that are dotted around the game's locales are fittingly industrial, a collection of whirring servos and busy robotic arms. A Paris boutique this most certainly isn't, and they are a perfect example of the quintessential video game objective or video game object being woven into Dead Space's fictional fabric. So these are this are the re-suiting stations. So whenever you buy a new suit of armor or upgrade Isaac's standard suit of armor, he climbs into this machine and the door is shut and you see a bunch of lights going down, you know, as if the armor is being kind of mechanically attached to him. And then he steps out and his helmet then forms around his head, which is cool. If you have not played Dead Space, I would look up an animation for the Dead Space suiting up animation that plays here, because it is very, very cool. Here is another picture of the suiting station, and this is kind of the interior of this structure here, where we see Isaac or a human in the resuiting apparatus ready to be suited up. So here, this is a bit of in-universe information about suiting up rather than a lore tidbit or a note from the developers. So it says, attention, use caution when stepping into the suiting mechanism. Make sure to securely stand on the steel footing and remain still as the sensors measure your size and weight to properly configure your suit. Keep arms and legs safely within the position tabs to ensure a proper fit. Do not try to get out of the suiting position until the process is complete and you hear a double beeping sound, similar to the single beeping sound heard when initiating the procedure. Do not attempt to force your limbs into position. The machine can cause bodily harm unless the suiting person remains completely still. Remember to always select a suit that you are capable of using. Advanced suits are not for young adults or small children. Remain calm and close eyes in case helmet attachment tools engage near the eye. So getting suited up is a very dangerous procedure, and I always had that thought when playing the Dead Space games. Seeing the suiting mechanism is like, you know, if someone were to move or if the machine malfunctioned or something while you were in there, you would be absolutely done for, which I think is really, really cool. So here we have some suits and we have some schematics. The text here is tiny, so I am going to do my very, very best to read it. So the helmet, extended neck verticality as much as possible during the helmet attachment. The torso, inhale and hold a deep breath to ensure the attachment of the torso portion of this suit. Pointing to the knees. Knees should remain relaxed with a slight bend. Here it says some discomfort may occur as clasps position your body into the proper position. Here it is pointing to the shoulder pad. It says shoulders are to remain down in case of a forward position. The gloves or gauntlets or forearm pieces. It says gloves are snugly conforming to initial position of fingers, so it is recommended that a neutral position is used during the process, initiation. This is pointing to the waist. It says waistlines can be adjusted after the suit change depending on the size of the suit model. And pointing to the boots, it says boots are the first applied and begin the process of suiting up. So the way it works is it suits you up starting at your feet and working up all the way to your head. Things like this I really like little in-universe information about certain mechanics. I just think it's really cool. And yeah, it would be terrifying to have something go wrong in the suiting station. Okay, next up. I believe this is a new section. This is the characters of Dead Space. So it says, Isaac is an isolated character, but sometimes he's joined by fellow humans throughout their journey. More often, foe than friend. Introduced in Dead Space 3, Norton is a threat to Isaac, though not in the same traditional limb-ripping sense. Rather, he is a close companion to Isaac's love interest, Ellie, and his relationship sparks off an emotional conflict that runs through the overreaching horror of the Necromorph menace. So basically what happens is Ellie is a character introduced in Dead Space 2, I apologize, and she is one of the main supporting or side characters in the game, and spoiler alert, she ends up saving Isaac's life at the end of Dead Space 2. And then when Dead Space 3 starts, we find out that after the events of Dead Space 2, Isaac and Ellie got into a relationship together. However, that relationship ended, and based on what we see in the first cutscene of Dead Space 3, it doesn't look like Isaac is over it completely. So in Dead Space 3 then, when we encounter Ellie, she is accompanied by the commander of the unit that they are with, but the commander is also her boyfriend. So she is overjoyed to see Isaac again, and Isaac is overjoyed to see her again. However, he does not like this at all, and he is very antagonistic towards Isaac through the entire game because of this, which is crazy. Like, imagine there's a necromorph infestation, and you know, potentially around every corner you're gonna get limb for limb, but the whole time you're just, you know, jealous of your girlfriend's ex-boyfriend. That's crazy to me. Okay, next up. Details of suit character designs for Norton. Norton is this guy here and Ellie's boyfriend and commander in Dead Space 3. Santos above, this is Santos here. We will look at her in a minute. And Ellie, this is Ellie below here. Ellie is not the first love interest for Isaac in Dead Space because he had his long-term girlfriend Nicole in Dead Space 1, but that did not end well. Won't go in any further until we get to that part of the book. But she has one over on Nicole by not being a hallucination that's driving him to suicidal insanity. So yeah, Isaac, the marker did a real number on Isaac, and he has hallucinations of his dead girlfriend. So this is Norton here, again in his snow suit. He has more typical military style armor, since he's kind of like a soldier compared to Isaac. Horton up here again. I can't remember what her occupation is in the game. I do not believe she is a soldier, but she doesn't really wear armor. She just wears the snow-covered attire. And Ellie is a little bit of both. Ellie looks also to be kind of like not a mechanic, but, you know, someone who works aboard the ship and has survived the events of Dead Space 2. What is interesting, and is never mentioned or brought up, is in Dead Space 2, Ellie loses an eye. I believe it is her right eye, I think. So I relate to her on that level. But then in Dead Space 3, she shows up with both eyes. So either she got a prosthetic eye, which no one ever mentions. You would think Isaac, upon seeing her, would be like, oh my god, you got your eye fixed. Or the devs just forgot. And normally I would not think of something like that as the devs just forgot. But if you have played Dead Space 3, the devs forgetting is 100% plausible. In my opinion, anyway. Can you guys tell that I do not like Dead Space 3? Okay, here are some more characters, but we will again read what it says first. Tau Volantis introduces a new human faction to the Dead Space universe, the Sovereign Colonies Armed Forces, or SCAF. A military crew who find themselves on the brutal ice planet, that's Tau Volantis, and their look as, and the look as well as their demeanor has been toughened by the elements. The SCAF are ultimately revealed to be tangled within a conspiracy surrounding the markers and played a pivotal role in unearthing its true purpose. So this is some of the designs of some of the SCAF enemy types. I am not a fan of these guys. They look really cool in this art book, don't get me wrong. Their designs are incredible, especially this guy here with his suit of armor and his kind of gas mask thing. But having human enemies that then devolves into a cover-based third-person shooter in a Dead Space game is just wrong and does not fit the themes of the game at all. Whoever thought of this and implemented it into the game, why? That's okay, tangent over. Here we go. This is what I was looking forward to. So, the USG Ishimura. So we will read what it says, and it says quite a bit, so excuse me if I stutter a few times. I'll try my best not to. So, the Planet Cracker. The USG Ishimura is a planet cracker, a hulking industrial ship that is designed for one purpose, to mine entire planets in a bid to save a dying Earth. But inside it holds a deadly secret, a warren of dark corridors and deathly shadows that's home to one of video games' best horror stories. The Ishimura came about because we really wanted to do some big sci-fi ideas in the story, says Ben Winnat. We wanted it to be grounded, but we also wanted it to throw in some elements that border on the fantastical. That's where the whole idea of planet cracking, where you've got a large industrial ship that goes around and destroys an entire planet to get the resources from it. It is spectacular. It is that spectacular function that initially dictated the Ishimura's design and took the ship on a very different path to the one it would finally settle upon. In the initial design, it was these glistening towers and this almost beautiful setting, but we thought that that wasn't going to work for the horror. So we took this notion of this oil rig out at sea and built that into this planet cracking idea. We started to get some sketches out and began to see some designs we were really happy with. the grounded industrial roots of the USG Ishimura can be seen in the exposed ironwork and creaking steel that keep it together. It is a structure that is It is a structure that is unequivocal in its own construction, an explicitness that is essential part of its design. A reference point was a Gothic architecture structure. Those are built. Those are buildings that are really easy to read how they are held up, reveals Ian Milhelm. Today's artwork with cantilevers and different technologies, they purposely hide that as much as possible. We tried to make the supports exposed so it feels like a tangible space with weight and believability. It's that believability that gives the Ishimura resonance. Although a fantastical ship built for some 400 years in the future, it's a living, breathing space. And any players who survived the nightmare will likely tell you it's almost as if they have been there. So a couple of things we're just going to talk about. So the USG Ishimura is the ship that the first Dead Space game takes place on. Now, it mentioned here that this is a planet-cracking ship. So what is planet cracking? Essentially, Earth is so overpopulated that they are almost fully out of natural resources. So planet cracking became the most efficient way to get resources. So lots of ships like the Ishimura are sent out to do just that, crack planets. However, the Ishimura is among one of the finest of the planet cracking ships. It's almost like the Titanic in terms of its majesty compared to other ships, even other planet crackers. So what is planet cracking? Planet cracking is a process where the ship essentially rips chunks out of the planet piece by piece. As you can see here, this massive chunk of the planet is being lifted up and is then pulled into the Ishimura, where it is mined and has all of its natural resources extracted. This continues until the planet no longer exists. So they essentially cannibalize planets to get their resources, and this is a common practice in the Dead Space universe. However, planet cracking takes years to do. Just one planet, even a small planet, never mind a big planet. So, because of this, the USG Ishimura and other planet cracking ships aren't just mining vessels. They are essentially flying cities because it takes so long. All of the workers bring their families with them. So you have not just the engineers and, your typical ship personnel such as, the captain, the security forces, the medical personnel, but you also have, civilians, people's wives, people's husbands, people's children, and stuff like schools and cafes and everything. It's designed to be a place where people are going to do their best to live a quote-unquote normal life during the years in which it takes to crack a planet. And the way it also works is the Ishimura and other planet-cracking ships set up a small little colony on the surface of the planet that they are cracking, just to help the process of getting the cracked piece of the planet through the atmosphere into space, at which point the Ishimura then brings it in with its gravity field. The Ishimura is one of my favorite spaceships in all of science fiction, and it's super, super iconic. Anyone who plays horror games or likes horror games knows the Ishimura, and it's amazing. From the outside, the USG Ishimura looks like the upturned corpse of a dead animal. We started creating this motif in the fiction that everything would have these ribs repeated everywhere, says Ben Winat. I think that more than anything, this is one of the marks of Dead Space, where you see those horizontal slats everywhere, even on Isaac's face, that all came from the Ishimura's design. And yeah, the Ishimura is a very well designed ship. They did a great job of making it look unique, making it look very intimidating. So here are some pictures of the Ishimura, and here is a picture of the Ishimura in the midst of planet cracking. So this is a massive, massive chunk of the planet that they have ripped up and is currently being pulled up. You can see that there's lines that are attaching from the rib-like structures to the part of the planet. So here we have a picture of all of the different decks and rooms of the Ishimura. So we have the engineering deck, which is reddish pink, the hydronics oxygen farm, the cargo hold. The cargo hold is where they would hold all of the material that they get from the cracking of planets. The gravity center, the mining deck, the flight deck, the science and medical deck, the crew deck, and the bridge communications deck. And yeah, it is very, very cool. As you can see, all the decks are color coordinated here on this map. So, exploring the Ishimura. Too often video games send you to an incredible place that have one major flaw. They don't feel like places and instead feel like a video game level, built with the express purpose of tunneling you from one checkpoint to another. The USG Ishimura is free from such criticism, though. Blueprints reveal that it was designed to be a functioning space. Ben Winat describes some of the thinking behind the approach. As we looked at the ship room by room, we knew that it was going to be really important to link it all together so the player could understand where they were in the ship and make them feel like it was large and a functioning facility. Right there, the feeling very large is a very nice addition to the remake in the form of the tram. In the original Dead Space, you would exit the tram, do that level, go back to the tram, and move on to the next station or the next section. And the fact that the ship needs a tram in order to get around just shows how big it is. However, in the remake, you are able to go back and visit previous locations that you have already visited, which is really cool for, unlocking secrets and stuff like that, or just exploring. So I really like that about the remake. It's definitely one of the better things that it's not open world at all, but it just gives you the freedom to be like, you know what, I want to go back and explore, I don't know, the mining deck or something if you've already been there. Sorry, did I miss something? No, I did not. Okay, moving on. This looks like where things start to get bad. So this is inside of the Yoshimura, and as you can tell by these images, something is very, very wrong. We see the corridor here is in disarray. There's some kind of organic growth on the walls and a bit on the floor. There's an operating table covered in blood, as well as blood on the ceiling here and more blood on the window here. This looks like a deck that has multiple dead bodies on it. Isaac is a workman, and what is a workman without his tools? In keeping with the industrial blue-collar vibe that's woven into Dead Space's fabric, a fabric that's in all likelihood oil splash denim, tools take the place of weapons in this universe, a fact that gives the combat a unique edge. There's an interesting aspect that as an engineer, Isaac is more comfortable around tools, and we really liked the part of it. Ben Renat says, we decided we wanted combat to be a messy, tool-based thing and very gritty. It changes the nature quite a bit from bullets. That it most certainly does. The first Dead Space was praised for its unique dismemberment gunplay, a different slant on action mechanics that was heavily informed by Isaac's toolset. Most video games trade in headshots, but in Dead Space, it's about limb shots and severing the necromorph's diseased protrusions. So, since Isaac is an engineer and not a soldier, all of his weapons that he uses are engineering tools, which is really, really cool because, it wouldn't make sense. It's like, why would a engineer all of a sudden start using, military weaponry? There is, in the first Dead Space, there is one traditional gun, and that is the pulse rifle. It's a fully automatic assault rifle, and it is the worst gun in the game because it's terrible at dismemberment. All of his tools are engineering tools, and because this isn't just normal engineering, this is 400 years in the future space engineering, most of which is done in 0G. These tools do not mess around. So, the plasma cutter is just that. It is a cutting tool that shoots plasma and is perfect for cutting off enemy limbs in Dead Space, and is one of my reasons why Dead Space is my favorite horror game, just because of how unique that aspect alone is. So here we have the bench. So let's read what it says, and then I'll talk a bit more about the bench. So the bench. An extension of Isaac's reliance on tools is the workbench. Here the player can upgrade and augment their weapon set, and it often offers a welcome pause. Okay, power tools. This looks like we are getting into the weapons. So let's read what it says before we start looking at the images. Considering the incredible technological power and sheer number of opponents that Isaac faces, his own arsenal is strictly limited, facing down alien life forms capable of massive destruction with little more than power tools. Pretty much 80% of Isaac's weapons are industrial tools, with the few exceptions of military guns he ends up finding or scavenging during the game, reveals Shi Wai Lao. Though many of these weapons started with the game designers looking for fun gameplay methods, I started by looking up real-life tools and references, working with the art director's input on what he likes to see in this particular tool. Then I generate rounds and rounds of sketches of various shapes and designs. The real-world influence in Dead Space's toolset are usually pretty obvious. Walk around any tool hire place and you'll likely be able to spot the ancestors of Isaac's deadly weapons. It is probably best not to test how they fare against rotten flesh, though, should you want to see how the deposits returned. Anyway, so yeah, as I had mentioned earlier, Isaac being an engineer, all of his weapons, apart from one in the original Dead Space, are engineering tools. So, we have a lot of stuff on this page. So first off, we have the Ripper gun. This gun shoots out a massive spinning saw blade, which is incredible. It's great at taking out limbs, and its alt fire means that you can just shoot it out directly, cutting enemies in half. Here is multiple variations of the plasma cutter, and then we have guns down here. So we have the 1M-B22 handheld ore cutter, aka the line gun. This essentially serves as the shotgun of Dead Space. The 211-V plasma cutter, which is our favorite gun. The PFM 100 hydrogen torch, which is our flamethrower. And our handheld gravitational accelerator. I believe that this is a kind of railgun, but I actually can't remember. I do apologize. And up here, these are the scavenger bots that are featured in Dead Space 3. The way they work is, because Dead Space 3 has a crafting system, you need resources to craft certain weapons and certain attachments. So when you get to an area, a little pop-up will appear saying, this is a resource-rich zone, and then you send out your little drone. And depending on how long he's out for, by the time you get to the next, either a shop or a save station or a workbench, the bot will come back and give you all of the resources that he found. This isn't one of my favorite features in Dead Space 3. I personally don't like it. And what makes it even worse is, this being an EA game after all, there are microtransactions that you can do that involve these little bots. So first off, you can pay to have them find more resources. You can pay to have more than one bot active at one given time, and you can just pay to buy resources directly and skip out on the bots altogether. I'm not a fan of it. I know a lot of people feel strongly about microtransactions in single player games, and I am one of them, but this to me is just like really scraping the bottom of the barrel in terms of lowest of the low. And yeah, again, another reason I do not like Dead Space 3. Moving on. So here is some more pictures of let me zoom out a little bit, of the line gun. This fires a high-powered beam, kind of similar to the plasma cutter's horizontal fire, but much, much more powerful. This thing is capable of cutting an enemy in half with a single shot. Like I said, it is the Dead Space shotgun. Here is the line gun again. This is like a sketch version, whereas this is a colored version. Here we have the pulse rifle, which in Dead Space 1, and I'm pretty sure Dead Space 2 as well, is the only military style weapon and actual firearm that we find in the game. It is a fully automatic assault rifle, and it's just absolutely abysmal. in my opinion. It is terrible at cutting off limbs. So even though I played the game only using the plasma cutter, on subsequent playthroughs when I have used all of the other weapons, I avoid this thing like the plague. This weapon here, I am actually not sure what this weapon is. If anyone knows, can you please let me know in the comments, because I'm completely drawing a blank. Here we go with some more weapons. So, let's start here. So, Dead Space's slight nautical theme is a reference to referenced by the javelin gun, a high-end, heavy-duty weapon. It's more than a little reminiscent of the diver's spear gun combined with Isaac's antique suit, and you've got an image that looks like it's been plucked straight out of the pages of a Jules Verne novel. So this is the gun here. Very, very interesting. Over here, let's see, I gotta move the book a little bit closer, sorry. This is first introduced in Dead Space 2. The detonator boasts the capability to fire off sticky mines that are then triggered by movement, so like proximity and stuff. Perfect for laying a trap or managing busy crowds of necromorphs, a piece of kit that no toolbox should be without. And then also down here, the fiction of Dead Space is carried through even in the smallest elements of its world. The rivet gun, which is this gun here, for example, is a product of Timson Tools, an imagined manufacturer within the game. Its slogan is "Tough Job, Tough Tools," and whose logo is a common sight among Dead Space 2 in the sprawl. In the real world, the company name is a nod to the lead engineer of Dead Space, Steve Timson. So let's have a look at these weapons. Let's start with the detonator. This is a proximity mine launcher. I am not a fan of this weapon. Not because the weapon is bad, it is actually very good in Dead Space. Just in general in video games, I am not a big mine person. Like proximity mines, claymores, trip mines, anything like that just isn't for me. And I don't know why, I just personally do not find it fun. Then we have the javelin gun, which fires these massive spikes, which impale enemies into walls, which never gets old. It's very good against the hunter-type necromorphs. These guys like to hide behind crates and then charge directly at you, whereas with these, you can turn around, shoot them, and they go flying back and get impaled into the wall, which is always a good time. Next up is the plasma cutter. Okay, let's read about our favorite gun in all of Dead Space, the plasma cutter. Just as Isaac's mask has become one of Dead Space's most potent symbols, so too has his plasma cutter become a thing of legend. It is indeed pretty iconic, both for fans as well as us, agrees she, Wei Lao. This was the first weapon that was prototyped when we had the idea of dismemberment gameplay. Pretty early on, and the plasma cutter was one of the earliest weapon sketches I did, even with those curved fins sticking out from a handgun-like stock. While it wasn't heavily based on a particular tool in real life, it was the first tool we needed to develop in order to make the whole gameplay concept work. There had to be a heavy cutting tool that Isaac modified to have damaging range, as well as the ability to rotate its cutting angles. So yeah, you can choose to fire this either in horizontal or vertical mode. So this picture here is showing Isaac holding it in the vertical mode. Continuing on, we even thought of multiple angles and how it could cut, but eventually it became more practical for the game to have vertical and horizontal cuts. And we pretty much used the plasma cutter as our gameplay combat model and evolved other weapons from there, which makes sense. So, yeah, the plasma cutter is my favorite gun in the game, in all of Dead Space, really. We have some concept art of it here. Like I said in the beginning of the video, there is an achievement in the first Dead Space for beating the game only using the plasma cutter, which I got by accident. I didn't even know that was an achievement. I just used the plasma cutter the entire game because it was like the best gun. And then when the remake came out, I saw that they kept that achievement in the remake. So on my first playthrough on hard, I only used the plasma cutter, and it was some of the most fun I've ever had in recent years playing a horror game. In subsequent playthroughs, I have gone back and used all of the other weapons, which are all amazing, except the pulse rifle. We don't talk about that. The pulse rifle is like a weapon that we just don't talk about on this channel. So yeah. Here are some more information. So not going to spend too much time on the weapon crafting system, but the basic rundown of it is in Dead Space 3, there was an option to craft weapons, and you could have 2 weapons in one, essentially. So, for example, you could have a plasma cutter as the top gun, and then a ripper gun on the bottom. So you could have 2 weapons in one. This weapon has spawned a lot of controversy in the community. I personally am not a fan of it. Just because in Dead Space, each weapon serves a specific purpose. You know, the plasma cutter is your general workhorse weapon, the line gun is your shotgun, and stuff like that. But with the crafting system, it essentially just means that you can make whatever gun you want and have an all-purpose weapon. So if you make a gun that's good, you never have to swap between them. Also, and I think I mentioned this before, in Dead Space 1 and 2, each weapon has a specific ammo type that drops randomly from enemies and in containers. So for example, if you're only using the plasma cutter in a run, and you get ammo for the ripper gun, it's not worth picking up because it takes up an inventory slot and it's for a weapon you're not using. In Dead Space 3, however, they replaced this with just an all-purpose ammo item, which is ammo for every gun. It's a universal ammo type, which for a horror game, if you can even call Dead Space 3 a horror game, it is absolutely awful. So yeah, couple artworks here of some of the types of guns that you can craft. This is an example of the crafting system here. So you have your main gun on top and your secondary gun on the bottom. Yeah, so not going to spend too much time since we've already talked a good deal in weapons. So this is some more weapons. So this is a new section, the vehicles of Dead Space 1 and 2. So it says, the first Dead Space was set inside one of the most epic vehicles that the series would ever produce. But the move to the sprawl meant that the artists were able to explore a wider range of machinery, from urban commuter transport through to an EarthGov gunship. Dead Space 2 introduced a new wave of vehicles that upheld the rough-hewn future aesthetic prevalent throughout the series. So, as far as I'm aware, in Dead Space 1, the only vehicles are the ship that we arrive on, the tram or the train that we use to get from mission to mission, and then the ship that we escape on. I can't remember if that is the same ship that we crashed into the Ishimura on, and of course the Ishimura itself, but it is a vehicle since it is a ship. However, it's more of an environment as far as gameplay goes. And yeah, the Sprawl has a lot more vehicle stuff in it. Not going to go in depth on the Sprawl now because there is a section dedicated to the Sprawl later on, so I just wanted to save that for that section. I believe, but I am not completely sure, I think this is actually the tram that we use in Dead Space 1. I'm not sure, so if I am incorrect, I do apologize. This is the vehicles of Dead Space 3. Dead Space 3 moves away from the shiny, bright spread of the Sprawl and the paint of a grimier, grubber version of the future. The vehicles that patrol it are caked in more dirt and are more functional in their design, beaten up, second-hand rides that are all on the cusp of falling apart. Yeah, especially in the first couple of missions, I believe. There's like a lot of vehicles that you see that are more of civilian type vehicles, and there is a set piece at the very start of Dead Space 3 on a moving train. It is actually a pretty cool sequence. Credit where credit is due. As you guys well know at this point, I do not like Dead Space 3 at all, but the train set piece is very good, even if you are just killing soldiers, not necromorphs. These are some more of the vehicles that we find. These are vehicles that we find in Terra Volantis, which is a snowy environment, so all of these vehicles are well degraded and also covered in snow. In brief, this basically just says that the robust machinery from a lot of the shiny violence of Terra Volantis landscapes seem to have the better of some of Dead Space 3's vehicles. Snowplows, snowmobiles, and heavy-duty rigs are all part of the beaten-up look of the series. And yeah, it's very true. It is interesting, actually, in Terra Volantis seeing all of the leftover vehicles from when humanity had a little outpost there. But that's not it. That's about it, and they don't really serve any purpose outside of that, apart from just objects in the environment. Here is a bit about the doors. So it says, behind every door. Every decent horror film and games knows the dramatic potential of the locked door. Every player knows to expect the worst on the other side. Dead Space happily indulges in this convention, locking away chambers of terror behind thick, creaking doors. This inspiration, sorry about that, I lost my train of thought, though often comes from the mundane in Dead Space 2, some doors were inspired by Bay Area transport paths. That is very interesting. So yeah, Dead Space 1, and I'm pretty sure 2 as well, but just for Dead Space 1, there are many locked doors in the environment that you used a resource called nodes to unlock, or upgrade schematics. However, the trade-off is these same nodes are also what is used to upgrade both your weapons and your suit. So you have to kind of make the decision on what you want to use it. That, is it worth keeping the nodes to upgrade yourself? Or is it worth spending the nodes to maybe get some health? Maybe you're in an instance where you have no ammo and barely any health left, and you come across a door and you think maybe what's on the other side of this door might be the difference between me living and dying. So it's a very cool system where you have to make a choice, which I am always a fan of, and I think Dead Space pulls this off spectacularly. Okay, the marker and unitology. So I'm just moving this a little bit closer just so I can see. So death is only the beginning. The twisted backbone of Dead Space's universe is unitology, the religion that is a driving force in the series' narrative. Formed at the midpoint between our own present day and that of Isaac Clarke's, the Church of Unitology is a faith that is built around the markers, the mysterious spiraling monoliths that punctuate Dead Space's story. Although it started as a cult, as laid out in Dead Space Martyr, a prequel novel set 300 years before the events of the first game, by the time of the USG Ishimura makes contact with one of the markers, unitology has spread to every level of society. The core beliefs are simple. Unitologists see the marker as a way to open up convergence, an event that builds towards ultimate unity. What exactly that entails begins as an enigma before becoming grotesquely vivid. The events that tear through the Ishimura and the sprawl rebuke the beliefs of the unitologist as sickly, twisted flesh. So here we have some of the scribblings of the unitologists and a bit about them. So just before we continue, quick little bits of information about unitologists. So it doesn't say it outright here, but unitologists essentially believe that turning into necromorphs essentially make you enlightened or ascended to godhood, for want of a better term. So they want to activate as many markers as possible and turn both themselves and the population of whatever space station or planet the marker is on into necromorphs. Also, during the events of Dead Space 1 and Dead Space 2, I'm pretty sure in Dead Space 3 as well, but I've blocked most of Dead Space 3 out of my mind. We, the player, know that the unitologists are crazy and out of their mind. However, what Dead Space does excellent is it also gives a reason why Isaac does not like the Church of Unitology. So Isaac is an engineer, as you know. However, he's an extremely gifted engineer, so very, very skilled and very, very qualified. That's why he's, going to, or I was part of the repair crew sent for the Ishimura because of how qualified and how skilled he is. However, Isaac's mother was a part of the Church of Unitology, and she gave all of her money to the church, to Isaac's both dismay and distress, and because of this, Isaac had to attend a lesser school of engineering compared to one of the higher schools that he would have been more fitted to. So a real world example would be, attending community college instead of, say, Harvard or something like that. So I just like that as a fact because a lot of the time in games, we, the player, have a reason to not like an enemy faction or something, but the player character, in this case Isaac, doesn't always have an in-game reason why they are opposed to it, whereas Dead Space pulls this off very, very well. And if I remember correctly, all that information about Isaac and his family is in, it's either data logs or external media. I can't remember where I read it, but it was an external source. If I can find it, I will link it in the description. Aegis 7. So, Aegis 7 is the planet that the Ishimura was in the process of planet cracking. before the events on the Ishimura took place. And this is where they discovered the marker. So, Aegis 7. The planet of Aegis 7 is to Dead Space's mythology what LV-426 is to the alien universe. I actually don't know what that means. I am not as informed on the lore of the alien universe as I would like to be. So, sorry if I don't have any comments to say about that. I'm just, unfortunately very ignorant when it comes to the Alien franchise. Not that it's not good, I just kind of haven't been exposed to it that much. So, the pivotal point in a friction that has since stretched out both forwards and backwards in time. It is where the USG Ishimura carries out its fateful final mission, and where a red marker is discovered with catastrophic results. Aegis 7's significance is further underlined as Dead Space's story unfurls. It is not only where the Ishimura first encounters a red marker, but also where mysterious, covert experiments take place, and where the roots of the twisting conspiracies are uncovered. So, yeah, the marker has a very, it almost looks like a double helix, and it has a good blend of looking both mechanical and organic, which I think just adds a lot more to the kind of cosmic horror look to it. Here are some of the different concept arts of the markers here. I'll move this a little bit forward, sorry. Let me zoom in a bit so you guys can see. And yeah, not all of these are good, not all of these are bad. However, I think the final design for the marker is perfect. It looks intimidating, it looks otherworldly, it looks terrifying, and above all, it looks like something that is deeply, deeply ancient, which it is. Okay, here we have a couple of things, so let's just start with the the passage up here. Rather than being a moment of spiritual beauty, convergence is a messy, dirty affair. The markers emit frequencies that can send people into madness, be it violent psychosis that sees communities tearing each other limb from limb, or slow, creeping insanity that afflicts Isaac. The same frequency turns dead flesh into necromorphs, and once enough have been created, they gather around the marker in an act of convergence, leading to a new stage of necromorph evolution. So yeah, this is just what I was talking about with the bit about the unitologist's belief. So here we have a slasher necromorph with a bit of a light behind him, kind of giving him a bit of a highlight. Here's Isaac firing his plasma cutter at, I believe this is a downed slasher based on the spikes on its limbs. It might be another type of necromorph, I am not sure. And here is a picture of the red marker as it is being moved along the conveyor belt on Aegis 7. Let's move on. Unitologists. So, sorry about that noise. The grandiose, majestic unitologist ship from Dead Space 2 is as good as a signifier as any of the religion's status, sway, and financial power. What started off as a cult has, by Isaac's time, evolved into a belief that has touched its way to some of the most powerful companies. The Concordance Extraction Corporation, or CEC, are the owners of the USG Ishimura and are strongly linked to the Unitologists, who are responsible for sending a ship full of believers to the fateful mission. So yeah, as you explore the Ishimura, you find a massive section of the ship is dedicated to a church for the Unitologists, which is very interesting. So, this is some of the Unitologist vehicles. As you can see, very, very fancy compared to the other vehicles that we have seen in the book so far. And here are some of the Unitologist soldiers and militia that we fight in Dead Space 3. So let me read what this says. I'm just moving this quickly so I can read it. It's important that we don't come across as kooks, Ian Milhelm says, of one of the Unitologists. We tried to have people that were more reasonable in their Unitologist beliefs and reasonable in their perspectives of it. If they came across as a crazy cult, that's just not that interesting. That much is certain, or that much certainly is true in the earlier games, where well-meaning companions expressed Unitologist beliefs. In Dead Space 3, however, Isaac encounters a more aggressive and militarized faction of the religion. So yeah, and these are some of the soldiers here. As you can see, they have a much more paramilitary look to them, as opposed to the UEG soldiers that we find in Dead Space 2, which just kind of shows that these guys aren't part of any official army. They are part of the Faith Militant, for want of a better term. And their weapons are another example of this. They don't have the fancy pulse rifle of the UEG soldiers. They have some kind of much more, looks like put together from spare parts weapons, which I think fits the whole militia vibe a lot better. Okay, now we are getting to the good stuff. This is the part of the book that I have been most looking forward to covering, the necromorphs. So let's read what it says at the top. I'm just moving it a little bit closer, just so I can see, because for whatever reason I find the text in this book to be very hard to see. So, twisted anatomies. Every monster movie needs its monster, and every horror story needs its boogeyman. Dead Space boasts some of the most hideous and monsters and some of the creepiest boogeyman in the shape of necromorphs, the fractured mutants that are Isaac's main foes. Quote, what we were trying to do, as much as possible, was reference real-world things that gave us an emotional response, describes Ian Milhelm. We wanted the necromorphs to evoke injury, actual people that have been injured, as opposed to exotic aliens. For horror to really work, it needs to be relatable. The Predator is a big alien, for example, but he's not scary. Big aliens aren't scary. Yeah, depends on the alien, in my opinion. The necromorphs, though, most certainly are. Inspiration came from some obvious sources. H.R. Geiger's Xenomorph, and most pertinently, the warped abominations are seen in John Carpenter's The Thing. But from some less obvious places, too. Parasite fungi and the sticky effects it can have was one of many such sources. Over the course of the series, the necromorphs have been served up in some increasingly unsavory flavors. Come to the climax of Dead Space 3, they also reach the ultimate dread-inspiring form. Not gonna say what that is yet, because I'm pretty sure it is covered later on, but if it isn't, I will touch back on what this means. So here we just have a picture of a necromorph. Just by looking at this one, I'm not sure what this necromorph is supposed to be, if it's supposed to be a necromorph from the games or just kind of an image of a general necromorph. It kind of looks like a slasher, based on this little bit here. It kind of looks like one of their claws. I just need to zoom out a little bit, sorry. But yeah, let's dive straight in. Here is a horrifying picture of a necromorph. So this looks like a slasher based on these claws. The slashers are the basic enemy type in Dead Space. Now, do not mistake basic enemy type for easy enemy type. Slashers, especially on the higher difficulty, are extremely dangerous and extremely fast. Over here we have one of the types of necromorphs. These are essentially crawling heads, or crawling head-shaped necromorphs, and what they do is they attach themselves to corpses, and if the corpse has the head, it removes the head. If the corpse does not have its head, it does the same thing, which is it inserts itself into the head opening, connects itself to the vertebrae and nervous system and stuff, and then reanimates that corpse, which is extremely, extremely graphic. Here's a picture here of what looks like, I can't tell what position this guy is in, but this used to be a person with this massive tentacle monstrosity coming out with half of the head and what looks like a little bit of the spine. This enemy, to me, always reminds me a lot of the Plaga from Resident Evil 4, just based on the human body with a massive tentacled monstrosity bulging out of the head, or where the head used to be in this case. Here are some more pictures of some necromorphs. So this necromorph, I can't remember its official name. I believe it's called either the Crawler or the Reaper. And what they do is, as you can see here by this picture, they have two very elongated arms, which they use both as arms for grabbing and also as their legs. They also have this tail, which they use as a means of attack. So these enemies can crawl on any surfaces, so the floor, the walls, the roof, and are even very effective in zero gravity. They leap at Isaac, either pinning him to the ground, or if they get close, they will whip their tail at him, causing massive damage. These enemies are really cool. Not my favorite necromorph, but definitely a very cool design. And I'll probably say this about half a dozen times in this section, but these are one of my favorite necromorphs. I just think their design is very, very cool. So here we have a picture of a necromorph, and it says at the top, early concepts of the necromorphs had a translucent, swollen quality to them, like a bloated corpse. That is actually what I was just about to say based on this image here. That had washed up ashore, such as a Carlos Hontes grotesque figure below. I apologize if I butchered your name. The look came from the aquatic influence that was put on side, only to be returned to in later games, expanding on the necromorph concept. Ben Winot explains, I ended up doing hundreds of concepts of creature design, and I started building these prototypes that I animate so people could see their intention. Very cool. So this necromorph here, I do not believe is featured in any of the games. I might be wrong about that. It has been a very long time since I have played the Dead Space games. But I can't remember seeing one like this. But it is a very cool and almost has a very traditional vampiric appearance with the skin and the eyes. This guy actually almost has the same skin tone as I do, which is embarrassing. By the way, I know it said up here that this is based on a bloated corpse washed ashore. If you don't know what that looks like, please don't look it up. It is not nice. Just assume they look like this. Yeah. Mutants Rising. So here is a necromorph type, which is very interesting. So these guys have no offensive attacks. So they have no weapons, they have no claws, they won't leap at you and pin you to the ground. However, this appendage here is an explosive. So what they do is they shamble towards you, and they have a very strange, lopsided gait to their walk. And as they get closer, they throw themselves at you, and this detonates. On the harder difficulties, this is a one-shot. So you can dispatch these guys in a variety of ways. You can do the usual thing of shooting off their limbs and then just finishing them off. You can shoot this appendage here, which explodes and kills them instantly. However, my favorite way of dealing with these guys in Dead Space 2, since you have the kinesis ability, is you can sever the arm here, and if this sac is still intact, you can pick up the arm with kinesis and throw it at the enemy or any other enemy, and it also explodes. So here we have a massive necromorph here. This guy looks like a regenerator, but I cannot be 100% sure. Here we have some more pictures of a slasher. What qualifies a slasher is these massive spike appendages, which are, they protrude from the back or the shoulders, which is just a horrifying design. And this necromorph here looks to be some kind of man. He appears to be wearing like a gas mask of some sort, but as you can see, his limbs are twisted, his arm or his hands are disfigured, and there's tentacles coming out everywhere. Very, very cool. Okay, this is probably my favorite page in the entire book. So let's read what it says, and then we will talk about the necromorphs. So it says, from a distance, necromorphs are terrifying. Up close, they're truly nauseating. There's broken teeth, compound fractures, and things like that. We tried to make the bad guys as if someone had taken a human body and had it bent and broken the wrong way. Rather than it stretching, it snaps. So these images here are truly, truly horrific. So we have this necromorph here who has his entire face gone. All you can see is his teeth, and parts of his skull. You can see his nose, or where his nose used to be here, and an empty eye socket, and all of these protruding bits of flesh and tentacles. This guy here, and actually all of these, you know what, I'll save that until we cover them all. So this one here appears to have been a woman, with her lower face removed and replaced with this grotesque mockery of gums and teeth. Massive gums, if you can even call that a gum, or maybe that's just a piece of flesh. And instead of normal human teeth, there's about 5 massive teeth. These two on the left are a bit blunter, whereas these 3 over here are very sharp. This man here has had his skin flayed on the front of his face, and now has this mouth-looking thing, I don't even know what you would call this, with kind of a bulbous growth in the middle, which is very, very cool as it is disgusting. And this one is my favorite of the bunch. So this one is almost like a mixture of all of these. So we have his skin pulled back or missing and very saggy. We have some spikes coming out of his forehead. His lower jaw has been removed. You can see some of his teeth here. And then these 2 massive, massive fangs, which are very cool. And over here is a picture of someone who was in some kind of suit. based on the look, I'm assuming that this is a UEG soldier rather than someone in Isaac's engineering gear. And obviously, as you can see, their suit has been breached. The faceplate is cracked. You can see the teeth here are all bent out of shape and deformed, and then many tentacles coming out of, I don't even know where they're coming out of, but somewhere near his face. What I wanted to say was this guy here, if you have played Halo 4 and have played the Infection game type, this design reminds me a lot of the Flood in that game, or the Infected in that game, just based on the facial shape, the tentacles, and especially the teeth here. Maybe that's just me, but that's the first thing that came to mind when I saw this guy, but very, very scary. Here's a section dedicated to slashers, so let's read what it says first. Brett Marling is an artist with the grisly task of working on the necromorphs. Twisting bodies beyond breaking point is work that comes with its own unique challenges. I have anatomy pages open, but at the same time, you can't be too constricted, or you'll drive yourself nuts worrying about how things fit together. You have to break and bend and pull apart all the body parts. There's also the study of animal parts to bring into new elements of it. So all of these guys here are slashers. So this design here looks the most similar. Actually, these ones and these ones look very similar to the slashers that we find in the game, whereas these four down here appear to be concept art of the slashers. So what the slashers have, like I mentioned, is they either have the arms transformed, or the arms have almost become emaciated, and these spikes come out of their back. As you can see with this guy, his arms are down at his waist, and these spikes are coming out of his shoulders. What's cool about some of these concept arts is you can see two different designs for them. So this guy here, the second from the left, has his hands still and his arms are twisted. However, he has spikes coming out of his wrists. The spikes obviously aren't as large as the slashers we ended up getting, but a very cool design nonetheless, and also has two spikes coming out of his belly. This guy over here is my favorite of the concept art, just based on how unique it is. So this slasher appears to still be, for the most part, noticeably human. You can look at this and say, yeah, this was definitely a human once. His arms are twisted in the same position. However, these spikes appear to be coming out of his palms, and the spikes are a lot smaller, much more akin to daggers, whereas these guys have almost swords in terms of length. Very, very cool. I think an experience that people have had in Dead Space, universally, I certainly have, is because Dead Space is focused on dealing with limbs, whereas most horror games are focused on dealing with the head. A situation that I encounter, and like I said, I'm sure a lot of other people have, is, you'll enter a hallway, and at the end of the hallway will be a slasher, and as the slasher turns to you and starts charging at you, you revert back to your standard horror game instincts, and you shoot him in the head, and his head falls off, and you think, oh, I killed him. And then the slasher continues to keep charging at you, despite not having a head, gets to you, and impales you and rips you in half, which is very, very funny the first time it happens. I've spoken to a couple of people who have said that same thing happened to them, so I'm sure this has happened to everyone at least once while playing the Dead Space games. The variations of Dead Space 2. So the Dead Space 2, we get a lot more new necromorphs as well as redesigns of some of the classic necromorphs. So, the variations of Dead Space 2. The genealogy of the necromorphs was extended dramatically in Dead Space 2. Brutes joined crawlers, reapers, and lurkers in a grim rainbow variety. As species developed, demands a different outlook in the design. That was kind of different, confesses Brett Marlene. Most of the necromorphs are people-sized. You have to come up with how all of these bodies fit together and merge to form this giant, nasty thing. You still want to keep that human element because that's what makes a necromorph scary. You can see them as human in there. So, here are the types of necromorphs that we have. This necromorph, I think, looks like a type of regenerator. I'm not sure, I might be wrong about that. I'm just basing it on the folded back arms and the two little appendages here that almost look like T-Rex arms. This enemy is based on this is a child that has been turned into a necromorph. And have these massive clawed hands. These guys attack you in swarms. They die in one shot from essentially every weapon. However, they swarm you in great numbers and are extremely fast. So it's very easy to get overwhelmed by them. And if they close in on you and jump on you on the higher difficulties, it is essentially game over. This necromorph here is a boss that we fight in Dead Space 2 called the Tormentor, who pursues Isaac through the sprawl, and we eventually defeat him by sending him into outer space and then dealing with him in anti-gravity. I like this picture here because it shows a kind of size comparison between the Tormentor necromorph and a human. So I'm assuming this is like Isaac compared to the Tormentor. This enemy here is a brute who is in Dead Space 2. He is also, it might not be a brute, but a prototype of the brute is also featured in Dead Space 1. These enemies are very tough. Shooting them from the front is pointless. You have to wait until they charge at you and then shoot them in the back on their weak point. If you have played Halo 3, these guys remind me a lot of the Flood Pure Form tanks, just based on how they move. But yeah, these guys they're not quite bosses, but they're almost mini bosses. And yeah, having a good amount of stasis is very, very helpful for defeating these guys. So here we have a couple more types of necromorphs. So we'll start with the text as always. There was an oft-repeated tale about how the original Dead Space got its design inspiration from looking at car accident photos. It turns out it is something of a myth, but the truth is no less disturbing. I was wondering if they were going to bring this up. So, okay. We bought a goat at the butcher's, Ian Milhelm recalls. There's actually footage of the goat in the front end of the first Dead Space, where we were pulling it apart and sticking our hands in it. We were trying to get it that contrast between pallid skin and insides, old blood versus new blood, and all that kind of stuff. Fish blood was also really good. It's very dark and it coagulates, and it got a real thick, viscous quality that is kind of horrific. So yeah, that is a little bit of a darker part of the development of Dead Space. So essentially, the team bought a goat, butchered it, and then digged around in its insides for how to both, or inspirations for how to design the necromorphs, and also how they would look, cut up once Isaac has shot them to bits with the plasma cutter. This is kind of a bit of a controversial thing. A lot of animal rights activists are not happy with this at all. I'm not the biggest fan of it personally. I'm not a big animal rights activist guy myself, but killing a goat for a video game just doesn't really fit right with me. However, this enemy type here, which is one of the charging enemies, so what I believe this is one of the charging enemies, sorry. What these guys do, I think I actually mentioned them in part 1, is they hide behind, or they might be called stalkers, I apologize if I get the names wrong. They hide behind cover, and they have a very calcified forehead. So they hide behind cover, and they attack in packs, and they come out of cover and charge at you and knock you down, and then run away and hide again. They make no sound except for when they charge. They emit a high-pitched screech. But yeah, very, very cool enemy. And I don't know if it's just me, but its head, or its skull at least, kind of looks like a goat skull. Not including, the horns and these bits here. But yeah. So this type of necromorph. Real life and somewhat grisly influences remain in Dead Space. I referenced textures of meat, admits Bread Marling, who appears to have become an eccentric regular at his local butcher's. I'll go to the grocery store and buy the meat that's on the manager's special and scan it in, and it'll be all green and nasty looking. So yeah, this necromorph type, I can't remember if it appears in game. This might be one of the spore type necromorphs. If they appear in game, please let me know. But yeah, these look very sickly, very infected, especially this type here. But this enemy type here looks really cool. I believe this is just concept art, but it is like a mixture of half-infected body type with shrunken appendages, and then this massive, almost like a spinal cord that then becomes like a tail with a massive spike on it. Very cool. One thing about the necromorphs that I find very interesting is, because necromorphs are dead, or made from dead flesh, in universe and in the lore, they actually cannot be killed. Now, obviously, in the Dead Space games, Isaac is able to kill them because, being able to kill an enemy is essential for a horror game and games in general. But in the lore, you actually cannot kill them. That's where the whole limb thing comes in. So because they're not able to kill them, the best thing that people are able to do is cut off their arms and legs, and maybe their heads in some cases, so that they're just a torso, or a head and a torso with no limbs that can actually not hurt them. But that just makes it much more terrifying. Your usual zombie type enemies can be killed either by damaging their body enough, or shooting their heart, or shooting their brain. But the necromorphs, because they're essentially just masses of dead tissue, cannot actually be killed, which is just a little bit of information. Here is a enemy type which is super, super cool. So we will read what it says first. We ended up with a look that's almost like an uncontrolled growth, says Ben Wanat. You end up seeing people with more limbs than they should have. with ribs sticking out in places they shouldn't be. It's almost like someone took 5 or 6 different bodies and stitched them all together. The uncontrolled growth described by one ad comes to a chilling conclusion with this 3-limbed necromorph boss. So this is a boss that we fight in, I believe it's Dead Space 2. I cannot recall the name of this necromorph. I genuinely apologize. But what's cool and also terrifying about him, so we'll look at this picture first. So he has 2 massive arms that he uses as legs, and then a back leg which is also used as a tail. It almost looks like a beefed up version of the Reaper type enemy, but as you can see, he has lots of bits of human body parts attached to him. So we can see here there is a naked woman, or what's left of a naked woman, on his chest. We have 2 arms sticking out here. We have a head on his left arm. We have a head down on his right arm, much further down. And we have another woman here who is attached to it or conjoined to it. And same design here. We have the woman on the front. There's actually another person on the back here. This one looks like more like a man, but maybe that's just how the angle is. This guy is chest down on the necromorph, and also we have the same heads here, the other woman here, and the arms. So extremely, extremely terrifying. Say what you want about Dead Space, even if you don't like the games, the necromorph designs are incredible. Here we have some more enemies. These are some more of the spore types that we saw a little bit earlier. This is a picture of Isaac fighting them. So what these guys do is they shoot out little pustules at you, and you have to shoot them in their glowing spot, which is kind of like the bulbous head. So here is the drama of Dead Space 3. So it says, Isaac's previous adventures were hardly short by drama or on show-stopping set pieces and spectacular action from for Dead Space 3, as Isaac works his way towards unearthing the truth behind the necromorphs and the markers, and the story builds towards an apocalyptic crescendo. Visceral Games designers had to up the scale and up the threat. The broader landscape of Tau Volantis, the first time that Dead Space's game has had an entire planet as a canvas, which is true and is very cool. We do spend a mission on Earth in Dead Space 3, but Tau Volantis is a whole other thing, and yeah, it's a very, very cool environment. Again, not a Dead Space 3 fan, but credit where credit is due. An entire planet as its canvas enables this, and also allows that the introduction of a new alien species, as well as reimagined versions of old favorites. But it's not just a case of making bigger bosses and tougher enemies. For Dead Space 3, the threat had to be that of a much more profound nature. So what this looks like here is multiple people here. So these 2 guys are running away, and we have 2 people here. I'm assuming these are soldiers shooting their weapons at. This looks like one of the alien species that is native to Tau Volantis. I can't tell if this is a alien species that is still itself, or this is that same species that has been converted into a necromorph. I can't tell from this design, but its design here is very serpentine looking, with a massive plated forehead and 4 eyes here, which is very, very cool. Okay, now this is a very interesting enemy. So in the original Dead Space, hunters were some of the most formidable of Isaac's foes, biologically mutated necromorphs that boasted regenerative powers and the ability to soak up more punishment than their less powerful relatives. In Dead Space 3, they're even more deadly, and scarred with symbols from the marker that's drawing them towards their ultimate purpose. So the hunter is a massive, massive necromorph. He looks like a massive version of a slasher. You can see some concept art of him here. These appear to be different versions of his head that were in design. This looks to be kind of similar to the final product. However, I like this one the most here, like the 5 little eye appendages with the mismatched spikes, and then different variations of him up here. So this one here kind of has a human body that's more hunched over. This one here looks more skinnier and more in line with your typical slasher. And then these two look very similar to the final result. So he is a massive necromorph, and he has almost like these runes etched into him. The hunter is comprised of multiple beings or multiple slashers. So whereas a normal slasher is one person that has been transformed into a necromorph, the hunter is a combination of about 3 or 4. So his biomass is massive, and you can actually see on his back when you fight him that he also has a pair of ribs on his back, because there's a person that was kind of assembled into him from the back. As it says here, he is a regenerative enemy that kind of chases Isaac. He almost acts as a pursuer, very similar to Mr. X from Resident Evil 2. And we eventually defeat him by bringing him in front of a type of engine, turning it on, and then turning him to ash, therefore negating his regenerative abilities. But yeah, he follows you throughout the game, so the best course of action is to either shoot off his arms or shoot off his legs and then run, and then he'll regenerate and keep on following you. So very, very scary enemy and an absolute menace to deal with, especially on the higher difficulties. I know I keep mentioning the higher difficulties. That's just because my playthroughs of Dead Space have always been on hard. I just find it more fun. So, what I find fun about it is it makes every single type of necromorph a threat. So none of them are a pushover, from the massive boss of the Regenerator to the simple slasher. All of them can end you in 1 or 2 hits. Most of the time 1 hit, but yeah. Here we have some feeders and fodder. So it says, it is always nice to welcome a new member to the family, even if the family is a ragtag bunch of mutated corpses, and you're introducing a mummified stranger. Feeders are Dead Space's 3's addition to the Necromorph clan. They have their roots in the series past. Some of the very first concepts I ever did were mummified spacemen on a spaceship being taken over by corruption, Benwanat shares. Maybe because I did those things so long ago. As the creative director on the 3rd game, I really wanted to do necromorph mummies. There is something really creepy about mummified remains that trigger something different in you than a recent dead person. They've got their own creepy vibe. I went back to those images that I liked and decided that it would be nice to do a full-on pantheon of necromorphs based on that notion. So these are, like it says, mummified remains of enemies, of soldiers and workers that we encounter in Dead Space 3. They are very frail, very easy to take down, but they are very fast and again come in numbers. What makes them difficult is they are extremely thin. I'm talking like they have no muscle or fat or anything. They're essentially just a head and a spine and bones. So actually targeting them can be a real pain. We have a couple of different variations here. So this necromorph is a standout of the bunch, and this is a type that did make it into a game. This necromorph actually wields weapons as opposed to having growths that he uses as weapons. So this guy is using two types of axes or snow climbing gear, which is just very cool that a necromorph is using weapons. This guy looks to be a modified slasher type, so instead of the spiked appendages coming out of his arms or his back, his legs have been replaced with them. So he's almost like a combination between the slasher and the leaper, which I think is very, very cool. This one down here, his head, from the mouth upwards anyway, looks very intact. However, his mouth is extremely deformed and has these like saber-tooth-like teeth, which is terrifying. I imagine being bitten by this guy. Oh my god, that would be awful. And then here we have a very close-up of the feeder enemy type. As you can see, very mummified. His eyes are cracked and covered over with either cataracts or they're just gone. His nose is gone. His teeth are gone. He has something in his mouth. His hair is gone or missing. Very terrifying. And this is the second necromorph that has the same skin tone as me. So maybe there's a marker near where I'm living and I should probably move. Okay, let's continue. So here are some more necromorphs that we find in Dead Space 3. Some of the classic necromorphs types are reimagined and redesigned for Dead Space 3, with pukers and slashers being lent a little more grisly detail. The fodder is also available in more powerful elite variety. They've got the dryness, that gaunt feeling, Brett Marlene says, of the fodder, that sometimes we could play with Dead Space 3 because we have this new texting format. This is all new feel and sound. So here we have some different variations of the spitter and the slasher. So this guy here is obviously the slasher, and this guy here is the spitter. They're called spitters because they spit acid at you, or some kind of acid. It might actually just be bile, but very damaging and very disgusting. This guy is very, very interesting. So, as we saw back here, this feeder or fodder, whatever you would like to call him, is just in standard clothing. So this is just what the person died in. However, these enemies, so this slasher here and this fodder here, I can't remember if they're called fodders or feeders. It says fodder here, so I'm just going to call them fodders. If they are called feeders, I apologize. But anyway, these guys are in military gear and very heavy military gear by the looks of it, which makes them a pain to take down and very difficult to dismember because you're not just shooting through, tiny bones. such as in the slasher here, as you can see, it's just bone and sinew. So one shot from the plasma cutter, cuts that right off. Whereas this guy, has all of his armor on, which makes it more tough. And what's interesting about this is because he is in full armor, he looks, for the most part, human, because we can't see whatever way he mutated when he turned into a necromorph. We don't see what his hands look like. We don't see if his stomach is sprouting tentacles or anything, because he's still wearing his gloves and his chest piece. Yeah, as much as I dislike Dead Space 3 and hate the human type enemies, the additional necromorph types are actually pretty cool. And stuff like this enemy, this type of fodder, is just a very creative way of making it seem like, these were real people that have been transformed, and some of them are in completely undressed, some of them are just in, civvies, and this guy is obviously in his armor. Okay, let's move on. So here, before we get into it, let's just read what it says. Swarm infectors are another of Dead Space's 3 delightful additions, small, scuttling creatures that prove hard to pick off with standard weapon fire. They have rather charming ability to reanimate corpses, turning down bodies into vicious, flailing necromorphs. It is an addition that does much to change the way that battles play out in the game. So these guys here are Dead Space's 3 version of the necromorph type that I mentioned at the very start of the game, of the necromorph section, the ones that take over corpses by assuming control of their head. It says here, at some points, Dead Space's debt to classic sci-fi is more explicit than others. The swarm infections creeping into the host's body and reminiscent of Alien, while the dismembered heads crawling across the floor borrow from the thing's standout moments. Dead Space's fluency in sci-fi cinema only helps strengthen this vision. And here we have a little diagram of the necromorph form entering a corpse, so it enters through the mouth. These guys remind me of 2 things, especially this design. They remind me of the head crabs from the Half-Life series, and they also remind me of the flood infection forms from the Halo series. Now, I'm just going to try and move a little bit quicker through this section, because we have already passed the 1 hour mark, and I don't want to end the video until we are done with the necromorph section. Okay, long live the new flesh. Necromorphs look great on the page, but they truly come alive through animation, whether it's the quick slither of a leaper or the hunched scuttle of a lurker. The creation remains a sickly puzzle. It's taking a person and twisting them as much as possible, says Brett Marling. I often compare it to Lego. It's tearing apart a person and then putting them back together. So here we have another version of a type of Reaper enemy. As you can see, we have its 2 arms and its tail. This guy has a lot more of a mutated mouth, kind of similar to the Predator's mouth, with all of these spiky growths coming out of him, both on his face and on his back and neck. The introduction of a new alien species means a new type of necromorphs arrive in tandem. Without the human anatomy holding back the process, alien necromorphs are more abstract in design and in some ways more horrific. One enlightening point of reference during the creation of the alien species was Art Forms of Nature, a 19th century book featuring lurid geometrical depictions of sea life of German artist Ernst Haeckel. I apologize if I butchered your name. I know I butchered your name. I don't know why I said if. So yeah, so this enemy type here is a boss that we fight multiple times in Dead Space 3. We fight him twice, and each time he runs off before we can defeat him. However, in the final encounter, we defeat him with the help of Carver. So these necromorphs here are the Tau Volantians, the natives of the planet Tau Volantis. As you can see, these are more of their necromorph forms. So there's a bit on Tau Volantis later, but what I'll say now is Tau Volantis and Tau Volantians were another civilization that encountered the markers and eventually succumb to their onslaught and infection, leaving many in kind of suspended animation, the ones that survived, and the rest have been fully turned into necromorphs. A new breed. The aquatic theme that pre-located beneath Dead Space's first concept designs finally surfaced with the extinct aliens of Tau Volantis. I like the idea that they're using telekinesis, and sharks have their electrodes all up in their faces. So I was trying to add that element to it to give them this hammerhead kind of look, which is very, very true. Sorry, where was I? This hammerhead kind of look, explains Brett Marling. What it boiled down to, I was having this intelligent but somewhat aquatic look. So here and here, this is what the Tau Volantians normally look like. This is just them as they were, whereas these pictures here are them after becoming necromorphs. And you can see, even for an alien species, you can see just how much they have disfigured it, which I think is always a challenge for making something that doesn't look human be obviously looks like there's something. Okay, so this is covering something called the Necromoon. On designing the Necromoon, Winat explains it was not just about making the biggest monster we could. It is the culmination of everything that the game's about. It's far more than just a big monster in the sky. It's tied to the overreaching fiction completely. So these kind of moons are the final form of the necromorphs. What these moons are, they're not actually moons. They are a massive biomass of all of the necromorphs of a planet or a system. So once a planet has been completely overrun by the necromorphs and all life has fallen, they all get sucked up into orbit and they become one with one of these moons, which is very, very terrifying. Here's a little picture. We have Isaac facing down some enemies. The Blood Moon's design makes explicit the influence of the aquatic life on Dead Space's designs. Part inspired by a squid and part inspired by a jellyfish, the end result looks like a feverish imaginings of an 18th century sailor, and recalls the fantastical representation of sea life seen in that period. Again, the German artist Ernst Haeckel was a reference point for the artists. Here is another picture of a very disgusting looking necromorph. What's interesting about the moon is that it ends up being the fictional wrapper for the entire necromorph race, but also the markers in general. Explains Renat. They have a message that runs through all three games, but it takes all three games to explore it and make it clear. We needed a big hook fighting for life on a planet of death for a long analogy. The Necromoon also gives great visual presence throughout the game in addition to the mystery of, quote, how the hell that could happen to a moon, and what that would mean for the rest of the universe. It's a nice visual metaphor for all that Dead Space is about. So here is another picture. Kind of looks like a moon in forming. I'm not sure what this type of necromorph is, but it looks very Lovecraftian, almost like something out of Bloodborne, I think. Here's some more pictures of some more of the advanced stages of necromorphs. I'm not sure what this enemy type is called. I'm not even sure if this enemy actually appears in the game. But it looks very similar, in my opinion anyway, to the Pale Moon presence in Bloodborne, which is the final boss for the true ending. Maybe that's just me because, you know, everything I see looks like Bloodborne. I'm so much of a fan. Another picture of Isaac fighting a type of necromorph here. It says, throughout Dead Space's history, the guidance of H.P. Lovecraft's imagination can be subtly felt, I would say more than subtly felt, and it's writ large across the sky in Dead Space 3, Blood Moon, feels as if it has just stepped out of Lovecraft's own Cthulhu mythos, calling to mind the Great Old One, the huge beasts that are worshipped by the twisted human form. What the moons also remind me of is I'm a big manga reader, and for those of you who have read Junji Ito's book called Remina, it is extremely similar to the moons. The short little synopsis I'll give is a planet enters the solar system and people are sent to go investigate it, and they all lose contact. And it, spoiler alert by the way for Remina, so skip about a minute if you don't want spoilers for it, but it ends up that this planet is not a planet, but a planet-sized predatory organism that is headed straight for Earth, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it, and it ends up consuming the Earth. So I believe this book was published by Junji Ito before Dead Space, and I'm not sure Junji Ito is familiar with Dead Space, but maybe I'm wrong about that. But I can't help find the coincidence between the two. And here is the sprawl. It says, conquering a moon. After the first game, we thought it would be interesting to put you in the middle of a big necromorph outbreak, says Ben Winnett. The sprawl was the key set, and we built everything around the notion of what it's like being stuck on a space station surrounded by civilians who are changing around you. It's interesting it's an interesting survival situation to be in. It's kind of like being in the city of a zombie outbreak. The sprawl itself is as much a star of the second game as the USG Ishimura in the first, a colossal space station in orbit of Saturn's moon Titan. It offered a contrast to the rushing browns and reds of the Ishimura interior, and allowed a much broader, more colorful palette for the artist to play with. It is brighter yet darker, tighter yet more open. A complex backdrop within which the game could further explore the fragmented society of Dead Space's historic future. The first Dead Space was a particular moment in this series' history, says Ian Milholm, For Dead Space 2, we wanted to go a lot more modern and a lot more current day in technology of the universe. You see it in Isaac's advanced suit, and you most definitely see it in the sprawl, the sprawl differs very much from the Ishimura in two ways. The first thing is the Ishimura is a ship, and like I said, the ship housed both the miners and the staff and all of their families, but it is just a singular ship. The sprawl, on the other hand, is much, much larger and is essentially an entire city. It is a floating metropolis, and it houses millions and millions of civilians. So you have things like schools, you have things like shopping districts, housing districts, and everything in between. So it's a much brighter area to explore in contrast to the Ishimura. The second thing that's interesting about the sprawl and Dead Space 2 as a whole is in Dead Space 1 we arrive at the Ishimura after the necromorph out. So everything has eventually gone to shit by the time we reach the Ishimura. It's desolate, there's barely any survivors, if any, and the place is completely run down. The sprawl, on the other hand, we start at the beginning of the necromorph outbreak, and we see firsthand how this once sprawling, fully packed floating metropolis falls to the necromorphs in real time, especially as we go through the residential districts, which is very cool seeing a necromorph outbreak in action. Okay, so here we have a couple pictures of the sprawl. The sprawl is a circular space station, by the way. It's also known as Titan Station, since it is on the Saturn moon of Titan. Picture here of, I'm not sure what is actually being depicted here. It looks like a laser type weapon is being used on some part of the sprawl or an asteroid near the sprawl. Okay, the hospital. So let's read what it says. With Dead Space, not just that which lingers in the shadows that can be terrifying. One recurring motif in Dead Space 2 is the stark lighting inspired by the white glare of a dentist's light, which instills a feeling of being interrogated with nowhere to hide. The hospital is a perfect example of this philosophy coming into play. A clean and sterile setting. It's an unsettling space which Isaac first deposited, as well as a stark contrast to the environment of the first game. We wanted to make this shiny, bright future in direct contrast to the horror that was going on. So yeah, the hospital is an area in the sprawl, and like it said in the little passage I just read, it is a stark contrast to some of the areas in the Ishimura. It is bright with white walls, very clean, almost like a sterile hell, to the point of being very uncomfortable and on edge in the game. I'm like that with hospitals in real life too. I feel very uncomfortable in hospitals just from past experiences. Patient Clark. So I think this is about the beginning of the game. It says, the blood-smeared padded walls that Isaac wakes up to lay in the perfect foundation for one of Dead Space's main themes, Isaac's creeping insanity. Triggered by the marker and constantly threatened, he's constantly threatening his very safety. It's a space that echoes the confined and mechanized corridor of the Ishimura before expanding into the wider mess of the sprawl. So here we have some of the areas here. This looks like the starting area. How the Dead Space 2 starts is Isaac has been held in the sprawl for 2 years, and someone comes and tries to rescue him since he's in a straitjacket. However, his rescuer is turned into a necromorph by one of the infector types. The infector types kind of look like stingrays, and Isaac, with his legs free but still in the straitjacket, has to run through the ward that he's being kept in as all of the patients are being turned into necromorphs and UEG soldiers begin opening fire. The reason he's kept here is because he's the only survivor of the Ishimura incident, both so that they can study him and also so that his information does not get out. This is again another of the starting areas. So it says, we wanted our neighborhoods that felt different, Ian Milham says, of the sprawl's design. It's like Disney parks with that distinct onstage and backstage feeling. So you'd be in the trash compactor, you'd be in the factory, and you'd go through the door and boom, you'd be in the apartment building. You'd feel like you've come through different infrastructure of this planet. So these are some of the areas that we go through at the start of the game. This is one of the main areas that we enter. This person here slits his own throat, which is graphic. By the way, I think I said this before, but Dead Space 2 was my introduction to the series. Home is where the horror is. Sorry, I don't know why this text is so difficult to see. If Dead Space is about the cold isolation of being stranded, then Dead Space 2 is about the horror of seeing your domestic surroundings unopened. The living quarters of the sprawl are grounded in a grim reality, which lends them an eerie familiarity. So yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier, going through all of the living quarters. So this up here is one of the domestic and living quarter areas. This looks like a central foyer, and same with this one and this one. This one here is a part or an entrance to one of the Unitology churches, and this looks like the interior of a Unitology area. So we're just going to go through this very, very quickly. These are just some of the ads that we see throughout the sprawl. Like I said, the sprawl is a whole city, so there's lots of businesses and advertisements that we see. So there's a bunch of product pictures for different products. These look very reminiscent of the old style pin-up girl pictures and posters. I think so anyway. These are some of the stores that we pass through. These are some of the toys that we find around. This is actually kind of very cool. So this is a toy figure called Lindsay, who is a miner with an E, and she is wearing the mining armor or mining suit, which is what Isaac wears, which is just kind of cool that there's like an in-universe doll line that has this kind of suit on them, which I think is very, very cool. So this is the nursery. Won't spend too much time here, but this, as you can guess, is a nursery for all of the infants and babies and toddlers of the sprawl. So it acts like a nursery, a daycare, and all that stuff. As we progress through the game, we see what has become of all of the infants. They have been transformed into necromorphs, and they have this massive sack on the back of their on the rear of their back, and their heads are fully twisted around. So what they do is they crawl at you very slowly, but once they get to you, they explode, causing massive damage. So you have to pick them off quickly. And again, they usually attack in rather large numbers. Again, what you're also able to do is, because they explode, if you kill them without shooting the part that makes them explode, you can pick them up with kinesis and then throw them at enemies to make them explode. So obviously all of these pictures are post-necromorph outbreak, so everything is all cheery. We do revisit this area in the game after the outbreak, and the contrast is incredible. I'm hoping we see some more pictures of that. Here are just some new ads about, EarthGov and all that. Not spending too much time on this stuff. Okay, now back to stuff of substance. The Marker Lab. At the heart of EarthGov's conspiracy is the Marker Laboratory, a facility that hints at terrestrial roots for the necromorph outbreak. I wanted it to feel sterile and clinical, explains Joseph Cross, who helped design the labs. I pulled a bunch of stuff from NASA, as well as jet propulsion laboratories and aerodynamic buildings. I wanted to feel very high-tech and clean and sterile, as if everyone was wearing suits and gloves. So this is a lab where they study the marker, the red marker from ages 7 that caused all of the problems, was captured and brought to the sprawl. Now, the citizens of the sprawl have no idea this is going on. This is completely off the books, top secret, so no one knows this is going on, which is just terrifying, because they're doing this in a massively populated area of men, women, children, who for the most part are all civilians. Here are some more pictures. This just says about some of the environmental art. And yeah, this just shows some of, this looks like a hangar bay with a kind of ship. This is a window where we can see some of the research going on, and this just looks like a corridor. Okay, Dead Moon Rising, the lunar colony. Dead Space 3 is a home coming in all sorts, though it's not exactly happy one. The New Horizon, a lunar colony, is one of the very first off-world installations deposited on the pockmarked surface of the Earth's moon. Founded some 400 years before the discovery of the red marker, the New Horizon colony, by the time Isaac arrives, it is now home to the destitute and the plain desperate. Isaac finds himself here, battered and broken after the events of Dead Space 2, surrounded by a humanity that is seemingly without hope. And these are just some pictures of what has become of this colony and how run down it actually has become. Here are some more pictures of some of the environments in the ship. So up here we have some more of the ads. However, this time this is post Necromorph outbreak. So you can see some of the graffiti, you know, we are life is now we are lifeless. It also just says fuck a bunch of times. We are one is now we are done. We are power has become we are death. And yeah, we see some of the cars that have been abandoned here. This looks like a marker or some kind of necromorph building. Okay, Home Sweet Home. Dead Space 2 introduced a slightly brighter vision of the future, even if it was one that was still covered in grime and flecked with blood for Dead Space 2. There's a return to the darker vision of the first game, and a move away from the far future look at its immediate predecessor. So here we just have some more pictures of the inside. We have a picture of the slum here. We have a picture of Isaac and a character. I'm not sure who this is. The lighting is kind of bad on this picture, so I can't really tell. Okay, so the flotilla. The Ishimura's defense, the Ishimura defined the first Dead Space and set the tone for so much of what followed. Dead Spaces 2 Sprawl was impressive. So for a certain part of the series' audience, there was a yearning to return to the tight, confined, and echoing-filled spaces of the desolate ship. There is a canny solution to this in Dead Space 3 with the flotilla. A ring of shards and fragments that hold a fleet of dead ships, each with their own theme and motif, each offering the R team an opportunity to explore facets of the Dead Space universe. So here we have a picture of some of the dead Space Hulks and dead spaceships in as Isaac is traversing them in zero gravity. The command ship. Sorry, I have to move this closer to me just so I can see. The command ship. Sorry, I have to move this close just so I can see, as I can barely make out this text. The white on the light gray is not a good choice. So it says, a central hub for the flotilla, the command ship, or the CMS Roanoke, to give it its full name. It is an orbital station that shows off the deeply worn aesthetic of Dead Space 3. The central tower, akin to that seen in the airport, or in an airport, while the dingy motel on its surroundings ring, is also typical of the kind of beat-up place found in city edgelands. I apologize, I know I read that awfully, I just could not see the text for the life of me. So here we just have some more pictures of the command ship. The Mass Driver. All of these ships predate the Ishimura by a couple hundred years, says Ian Milhelm. They're floating around in a spaceship graveyard, and it gives us a chance to bring in vintage influences, especially in our own term for the 1940s and 50s, into the Dead Space world. CMS Terra Nova otherwise known as the mass driver, is the perfect example of that. A run-down vessel which also sees a return to the rib motif that runs throughout the series. And here we have some more pictures of just that. Okay, let's continue. Okay, Tau Volantis. So this is an area that has been mentioned a bunch beforehand, but this is a full section dedicated to it. Tau Volantis. Dead Space has explored spaceships and floating cities, but Dead Space 3 sees the series take in a planet for the first time. There's no cold comfort to be had. This is a harsh, violent backdrop where Isaac's tale moves towards a thrilling climax. Orb-like in its formation, and around 3/4 of the size of Earth, Tau Volantis is in the grips of an epic ice age that makes its surface near inhospitable. Some life survives though, and it potently holds some of the marker's greatest secrets. So here's some pictures of Tau Volantis. I really like this picture of Isaac kind of looking on into the distant landscape. There's something on fire over here, which is a stark contrast to the kind of gray-white hellscape that is Tau Volantis. People were concerned that they would lose the isolation they had in the sprawl, says Alex Muscat. But there are ways to create claustrophobia. For example, we pull in the blizzard really close, so there's a limited visibility. And then there are shadows of necromorphs that jump out. And that's what really defines Dead Space. It's these intimate encounters with the necromorphs. Here are some more pictures of Tau Volantis. We have this one, which is a picture of the planet. This one, which is Isaac. Isaac and his teammates, so Ellie and Carver and some of the other characters, crash land here. So this looks like Isaac coming out of the remains of the ship. Great double spread of Isaac looking on to Tau Volantis. This looks like a previous military compound by the UEG, or by at least humanity. I'm not sure if the UEG was formed at this point. Some more pictures here. This is kind of inside one of the Tau Volantis research labs. So we have some Tau Volantians frozen in suspended animation. We have two characters here. These look like Isaac here, and maybe John Carver here. John Carver, by the way, is the second playable character in Dead Space 3. Dead Space 3 is meant to be a co-op game, and player 2 plays as Carver. However, he does make multiple appearances in playing single player. I played Dead Space 3 once, and I played it solo. So, I only had Carver as an NPC. However, Carver does have a lot of his own story beats, which I find very interesting. Okay, Gimme Shelter. Tau Volantis boasts a weather system, a first for Dead Space. Although it's set mostly to cold and harsh through the bleak and ceaseless sheet of snow and outposts. Battered by the elements but offering small moments of brief respite, they are imported not only to give players a breather, but also control the pacing of the tightly scripted experience. The Way Station. Sorry, this is again very difficult to read, so I'm just moving this closer to me. Although Tau Volantis is seemingly inhospitable, there are signs of human life dotted across the prickly landscape. They are an enigma and an existence of the haunted house motif that provides the framework for so much of Dead Space. With the within each structure. So yeah, and here are just some more pictures of Tau Volantis and some of the human outposts. All of these human outposts are very, very old and are completely, or mostly run down, if not completely run down. So stumbling upon them is almost like going back in time hundreds of years. Here it says, we're going retro, says Alex Muscat of Dead Space 3's ethos, and it's something that can be seen in the well-worn interiors. Everything's going to be older. We're going from what we thought was present-day technology to the first two games, day technology in the first two games to something that's 200 years in the past. It's completely different look. Instead of doing iPads, we're doing CRT monitors. We're not doing it digital, we're doing cartridge. This is old technology. So this just further proves what I was saying, that these human bases are very, very old, and we can see some of them here. The interiors, as you can see, are in complete disarray. There's three bodies of three men hunched around the table. There's a bottle of liquor on the table there. These look like dead bodies that have just been wrapped up. They don't appear to have turned into necromorphs yet, but it's never too late for that. Okay. Entering the facility. The biggest secrets of Tau Volantis lie beneath its wintry surface, and it is here that Isaac comes across a new breed of creatures frozen from under the ice. They're more than a new, skittering presence in Dead Space's grotesque menagerie, though they're a link that binds together much of the mythology and lore of the Dead Space series and provide a satisfying answer to many of Dead Space's reoccurring questions. So this is Isaac looking on a massive structure. These appear to be some Tau Volantians that have been frozen. This one over here looks a little bit less frozen. I'm not sure if he has been converted into a necromorph, or maybe it's part of the same being. The Alien City. The original inhabitants of Tau Volantis were a race of aquatic aliens whose fates were interwoven with the markers. Tau Volantis was a giant ocean, and then it froze, explains Alice Muscat. That's why it's this ice planet. The aliens are embodied in the planet because they're aquatic by nature. Their design is rooted in that. For the actual architecture of the city itself, we tried to give it a circular motif. It's where all the aliens came together at one and built this machine. That's the city itself. The alien city itself is vast and cavernous, located miles below the surface of Tau Volantis, and provide one of Dead Space's most spectacular backdrops. Very true. So here are some pictures of the Tau Volantians. Like I said, they are, or like it said here, they are very aquatic in nature. We have some monoliths that they built. So the Tau Volantians were an extremely technologically advanced race. However, even their technology was no match for the necromorphs, and the reason the planet is now a frozen hellscape is because they activated that as a last-ditch effort to freeze the planet, to stop the necromorphs in their tracks, and also preserve what little survivors there were. so that one day they could come back and potentially be resurrected. Here is some more pictures of the inside of some of the facilities. So we can see some of the Tau Volantines all over the place here. We see two of them here. These two look dead and almost semi-frozen in time, whereas this guy here appears to be partly taken over by a necromorph, and as proof of this, there is a marker. I believe this is a red marker in the background. Okay, let's read what it says. For a series that has never shied away from sci-fi references, it is fitting that one of the final places Isaac explores is an explicit homage to the alien ship that's the center of Ridley Scott's Alien. Like the subsequent prequel Prometheus, Dead Space 3 toys with the concept that are rooted in the work of Eric von Däniken. Apologies for mispronouncing your name. Though, as ever, they're done with the style that is uniquely Dead Space. So here we have a bunch of pictures. So we start off with a human facility that has been overtaken by the time and the elements. We have this picture here, which shows a Tau Volantian who is not being taken over by the necromorphs. And over here is a picture of Isaac in a deep underground vault of the Tau Volantians. As you can see, there's two statues of the Tau Volantians on either side, so this place was very, very important to them. Here we have a double spread of a picture of Isaac. I believe this is him sliding down rappelling down an ice cliff based on the ice around him, and this cord attached to his back. This looks like a necromorph here. I can't tell what type it is, but it looks to be very hostile. We have a Tau Volantian here. At the end of the game, the Tau Volantians do become an enemy, which is kind of sad because they technically haven't done anything wrong. You know, in this case, we are the invaders, so we're invading their home planet. And based on everything that they have been through with the necromorphs, it's completely justified that they would be hostile. And then over here, we have 3 soldiers. I'm not sure if any of these are actual named characters, but these guys are shooting at the necromorphs and Tau Volantis as Isaac is repelling. And here we have a couple pictures from some of the graphic novels. I have not read any of the graphic novels. Actually, sorry, one thing. Here are some more pictures of the graphic novels here. I forgot this page was here, sorry. So I have not read them personally, but I have heard that some people like them, some people love them. So we have multiple pictures. We have a picture of a necromorph. We have a picture of someone, I'm not sure if this is Isaac or not, in the suit. We have a picture of Isaac in 0G, and I believe this is the ship crash landing on Tau Volantis. And then here we have 2 characters. I'm not sure who these 2 are, but a middle-aged looking man with a young woman with red hair. We have a man here who looks like this man here, but this is him from behind looking onto a marker. I believe this is a black marker, but I could be wrong. We have a picture here of, this is John Carver, I think, just based on his black and red armor scheme as well as the red eyes in his visor, in his helmet. Isaac's helmet has blue lights, whereas Carver's helmet has red lights. And over here we have a type of necromorph. I don't think this necromorph appears in the game, so I'm assuming that this type is exclusive to the graphic novel. And that, everyone, is the... Actually, let me just quickly say this. So it says the people that made this book possible: Ian Milhelm, art director; Alex Muscat, art director; Ben Winnat, creative director; and Kate Vatchford, producer. Special thanks to all the supremely gifted concept artists who have contributed to the Dead Space cosmos over the past 6 years. And biggest thanks of all goes out to all of our Dead Space fans. Thanks for enjoying this Dead Space world as much as we did. And we end with yet another Rorschach test. Let me know what you guys see in this one. I see a marker, but maybe that's just me. And that, everyone, is the end of the book, of the artwork of Dead Space. So I hope you guys enjoyed both this video and this 3-part series. I'm glad I was able to get it done in 3 parts. However, this video is probably going to be a little bit shorter. The Dead Space art book was a book I was kind of hesitant on getting based on not knowing what it would contain. However, I am extremely pleased with what this book has in store. And if you are interested in Dead Space, even in the slightest, I would recommend this book so much. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making this. As a massive Dead Space fan, any excuse to talk about Dead Space is always welcome to me. So, if you are listening to this video as you are trying to fall asleep or trying to relax, this is the end of the video. So I'll give you a few seconds to pause the video. I just don't want an ad to pop up and ruin your relaxation. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Our next book that we will be covering is a FromSoft game. So I'm not going to say which one it is, but if you are familiar with me or have maybe taken a few hints from the Bloodborne series, it is my second favorite FromSoft game. So thanks again for watching. My name is Crimson, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.